Welcome to Scott Logic. For those of you who don't know us, we're a tech consultancy, and tech is traditionally one of those areas where women are still underrepresented. And that's why we're doing a lot of things to try and increase the number of women in tech, such as events like this. Before we get going, a couple of health and safety things. If the fire alarm should go, please all head straight out of the double door behind you and you'll find stairwells, so we're not allowed to use lifts in the event of an emergency. Stairs down to the ground floor and follow round to the front of the building. Toilets are also out by the lift shaft as well. We're live streaming this as well as in the room, so if you have any questions you'd like to ask any of the panelists, if you look for the posters around the room with the QR code on, that'll take you to Slido, the app where you can be submitting any questions. They'll come through to me on my iPad and I can put your questions through to the panel. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce you to our panel. We have Charlton, previously a journalist at the BBC and now working here in the Northeast in the Helix site to promote the area to new people. Marra, who's our Chief Talent Officer at Scott Logic, and Sam, who's the CEO of Marra, another tech consultancy here in the Helix. Okay, so thank you all very much for joining us. So the whole theme of Women's History Month this year has been women who tell our stories. So that's exactly where I would like to start off, please. I'd love it if you could each tell us a bit about your own career story. So starting with you, Sam, I mean, you have worked for one of the biggest tech companies in the world.
I have.
How did that come about?
Well, I started my tech journey about 25 years ago. I had no intention of working in tech. I did a degree in performing arts. I fell into working in technology, but actually loved it. And I really am a self-declared geek. I love the way technology can impact people's lives. But I always wanted to work for a really big tech firm. And I had always wanted to work for Microsoft. I wanted that experience. I did try once when I was living in Dublin and failed. To try to become a product manager, and then when I moved back over to the UK, I kind of put that as a kind of career destination for myself, and really did what I could to find my way there. And yeah, but it was an amazing experience, really brilliant.
Great. And Marra, how about you? You've worked in an entirely different role, but again in the tech industry.
Yeah. So I think the route that I chose to go down in terms of my career is talent development. It was unplanned, like you. So I think I tried to actually get into a fashion design course and I was too late. So they closed the door on me and I had to choose something. So I chose communication and journalism. And I didn't go into that either, but it's helping now. Ended up actually working my first company allowed me to get involved in skills development and employment equity, which was an act passed in South Africa. And that allowed me to understand how fascinated I was with development and growth of people, particularly from previously disadvantaged groups, and how I could actually investigate pursuing that. And I guess the rest is history. It sort of evolved from just basic learning and development into strategic talent, and then looking at org development and behavior. So it's been an evolution, but quite organic.
Great. And Charlie? Industry, broadcast journalism. How did you end up there?
How did I end up there? No, I was kind of living abroad and wondered what on earth I was going to do with my life. And I always knew that I loved radio, had a love for radio, loved talking to people and hearing their stories, but had no idea what that job was. And so in the early days of the internet, literally looked online, what is that job? And up came broadcast journalism. So did my postgrad in London and then ended up, for family reasons, coming back to the Northeast. And then was at the BBC for almost 20 years as a senior broadcast journalist and loved it. Absolutely loved it, loved who I worked with. But now on the outside, I get to have an opinion. Editorial policies out the window. No, it feels great. So the same thing I'm doing now is just journalism, which is just exploring people's stories, meeting them and trying to pull on those threads and find out what makes them tick. And exploring, particularly for women, those unheard voices, really. The people who say, oh, it's nothing. And you think, it is something, you know. You've survived cancer 5 times. You've adopted dogs from Syria. You set up a business with a baby under your desk. That's kind of something. So that's what I do. Yeah.
Amazing. And Sam, you mentioned about having a career destination. You always wanted to work for Microsoft. How important do you think that is versus just grabbing any opportunity or following the role rather than the destination?
So I always talk about being opportunistic in my career because I think it's important you don't have complete fixed idea, because you can get disappointed if it doesn't happen in that time frame. And also you can really miss opportunities that you might find that are left field. But I had ideas of where I might want to be and the kinds of experiences I wanted and the kinds of outcomes I wanted. And I felt that in terms of my career experience and where I'm challenged, I love a challenge. I love to learn. Going to Microsoft for me was where I'd experience that kind of big corporate lifestyle, if you like, and learn loads from different people. So it was important because it would give me something back as well as me being able to give something back. But it's really important that you have, I think you look at opportunity as it materializes in your life so you don't miss out on things. There's a great book called Squiggly Careers written by Helen Tupper, who's an ex-colleague of mine, and it talks about that squiggle. And if you look at my career, it is a squiggle. I've moved left, I've moved up, I've moved down. You know, working at Marra, coming to Marra, that was an opportunity based on a conversation. And here I am doing something that I absolutely adore and love. So, yeah.
Amazing. And Charlie, like, how different do you think your career would have been if you hadn't gone and worked for the BBC?
Probably the driving force to work for the BBC was because of news. So working in daily news in a broadcast setting, there was nowhere better, really. So I worked in the commercial sector, but it was always quite limited because you've got advertising sales, and that has to be a priority because that's how they're funded. So I had to do that, but I loved it. I loved it. The grit, I mean, the number of murder trials and all of that stuff, and holding to account. There was a major part in working for what is effectively public sector in many ways because of the way it's all funded, and being able to hold institutions to account, being able to say to Ofgem, you know, why on earth do you still have prepayment meters? You know, what is going on? Yeah. Just sorted in the last week. You know, there's all of that, and then politicians, and having that opportunity, I think, to speak to prime ministers, endless cabinet ministers who, you know, Dave the taxi driver has very important points to make, but we'll never get that opportunity. So, I mean, it's an absolute honour to be that kind of vehicle between those things. You just hope that you do the best job for that, and whilst always remaining independent. If I'd gone off elsewhere, gosh, who knows? I'd probably be in jail.
We're very glad you're not.
Me too. I think my family are quite happy with that.
And Marra, what are your thoughts around the difference between having a targeted employer that you want to work for versus having a dream job?
So I think it's obviously very different for everyone, but for me it was always about opportunity. I never had a targeted employer in mind. So if I think about how I first got into where I'm at, I think I was working in this building, and there was a job that came up, right? And I thought, okay, that sounds interesting. It was doing apprenticeships for Section 28 of the Metal and Engineering Act. Sounds so exciting. And I thought, all right, but there were a few drivers there. One, I had no management experience. Two, I thought, okay, I'm pretty young. I'm not going to get an opportunity, particularly in South Africa. So let's just grab what was in front of me. I wanted to become a manager. I wanted to grow. So I was quite hungry at the time. And then the other bit was, it was more money, right? I was a very young mother and I wanted personal independence. So I had some personal drivers. And so I gave it a go. I went for an interview. I studied up on an act that I had no idea what it was about. Went through some assessments, passed that, and got this job, which was very, a bit of a shock, I have to say, because the link between my understanding of apprenticeships and what I could do practically was quite tenuous at best. So I think it was more academic in my head to go for something like that. But every role post that drove me, it was my foundational entry into a career that was unexpected, like talent and development. But every role that I've taken after that, there was the questions that went through my mind is similar to you, Sam, is it going to challenge me? How am I going to grow? And because of my level of curiosity, what's the opportunities? What's the company's purpose? I was always interested in company's purpose and how they treated their people. So all of those questions, but ultimately I'm a learner by nature. So I just wanted to learn, and the brand meant nothing to me. I was just very lucky to get into some really good brands along the way, but it was secondary.
Amazing. So how do you know when you find the right thing for you? If you're trying lots of different jobs, lots of different industries, when you're young, what's that moment when something clicks and you go, I found my home, this is where I want to be? And Sam, what was it for you about tech?
So I think it comes down to culture, really, and you get a sense of that through the interview process. But certainly when you sort of walk through the door, and I think being able to recreate that, I think, is really, really, really important. But that for me is that sense of, to your point, am I being challenged? Is there opportunity for me to grow? Am I being invested in? As a woman, it's really important. We don't get a lot of that. So am I being invested in? Am I being treated equally? And you find that place and hopefully find the people that you want to work with and be with for a long time, and return that loyalty. I certainly felt that walking in the door at Microsoft. It's what we're trying to create here at kind of Marra, that sense of purpose and a sense of belonging as well. But I think you get it. You get that vibe through the interview process. How people treat you is everything, I think, in life. So you get a sense of that, I think, very early on.
I mean, you talked really passionately about telling people stories. What is it about that you love so much?
People. It is so simple with me. I'm a very simple beast. I like people. That's my default position, and I like to hear about them, their personal lives, their professional lives, and the kind of focus of that. The nub I find that's difficult is when you're younger, even if you went into a firm and went for an interview, I think you're just so overwhelmed by the whole thing. You don't know what the job title means, you know? And would you have known what talent was, what working with people was? You don't understand that until you're actually in there. I think for me, I'd done a postgrad, I'd done work experience, but not until I'd spent a few weeks in an actual newsroom did I really know what a newsroom was and how very closely it was aligned to Drop the Dead Donkey. You'd think that was ridiculous, but then you realise, and it's the things that you don't quite grasp until you're in that job. And then I wonder, then is it too late? Have you you've put your eggs in that basket, and then how do you, if you were going to have the squiggly career, it takes quite a bit of courage to then leap out of that and choose, is this a better place? And I don't know, is that just something that comes with age, the experience?
Experience of being able to judge and use that experience to assess, is this the right place for me? One of the greatest gifts that I was given as I kind of went in my career was this concept of job crafting. So this idea that you're using your strengths to look at how you can best perform the job, even if it's not the job that you're most suited to. And I've taken jobs where I've taken a massive leap because I knew I felt I should do the job, and someone was coaching me to go and do this job because it will take you to that next job. And I was rubbish at that job. But I did what I could only do is pull on myself and those strengths and that job crafting around it to bring those strengths to play on it. But I think those are things you have to learn as you embark on your career. Yeah.
And Marra, kind of tied to Charlie's love of people, what is it about learning and development, apprenticeships, talent that's kept you in that industry for your career?
It's always been about people. So I'm really fascinated by positive psychology and that impact on accelerating human potential, right? Which is why I went into org development and behaviors, because I believe that certain behaviors, how we treat people, really good leaders can maximize potential and bring out the best in people. And there's not a lot of good leaders out there. I've been exposed to good leaders, and I've been exposed to really crap leaders of all genders. And the bad leaders have made me want to leave good jobs where I enjoyed the people, I enjoyed the culture. And there's a saying that people leave their managers, not the organization, and I think that's true. So for me, it's always been, how can I help people or help leaders and anyone that I work with understand the impact of behavior on others, and making people feel that actually, regardless of who I am, how I come across, what my background is, I can actually be really successful and in whatever it is I'm doing. And it boils down to how we treat people. Is it Maya Angelou that said,
yes,
you remember how people make you feel, but not what they said? So that's exactly it. So it's people, development, seeing them grow and move.
Do you think that's easier to do in a smaller firm than in a large organisation?
I think there's a lot more focus in large organisations around people development now than there used to be. There's so many leadership programs that they really understand the need to professionalise leadership and development, because you do get that attrition issue, and to your point, you can have, if you drop somebody who's a bad egg into the middle of an ocean, it can have such a huge impact, and you see these people just kind of bouncing away. I think the challenge in small organisations is that everyone's so focused on, getting to revenue, to customers, and they don't always focus on development of people. So they haven't got time. There's not always that investment in it. It's not always seen as a top priority. And I think then when you start to scale out of being a startup into the kind of next size, that's when it starts to impact, because you haven't really thought about how leaders behave and their impact on people.
I agree with that. I think larger organizations, there's greater investment because they've realized the impact of good leaders on future growth of the organization. So the skills we have today versus the skills of the future may not be the same based on the plans for growth. And so you have emerging leaders programs, you got apprenticeships and you name it. Smaller organizations, they have to look at all of it in one basket and think about how we actually start to separate the pot in terms of focus and intent. And so I think there's an understanding on the importance of leadership. It's just about how do we split prioritization across it. And we also have lack of smaller resources, right? And so I guess it's about how we prioritize.
Yeah. I have to say that I think in big organizations, bad leaders can hide. And sometimes bad leaders can be rewarded for performance, even though their behavior towards people is poor. So, large organizations culturally have to avoid toxic cultures and ensure those people are dealt with and exited, because they might have a short-term impact on good performance because they're kind of whacking the stick around, but actually longer-term impact is quite negative.
Coming back to you, Sam, something that I picked up on something you said before about having a purpose, yes. An organisation with a purpose. I mean, you left Microsoft to come and be the CEO of Marra. Yeah. What's Marra's purpose?
Gosh. So Marra's purpose is kind of threefold, really. We're very driven. We're a socially driven, social purpose-driven organisation. We want to change the face of technology for good. Really focused on addressing the diversity deficit that exists and the kind of culture void that exists in big tech. We also have a fundamental belief around the fact that technology should meet the needs of everybody in society and not just a few. And how we invest in that is making sure that everybody can be a part of the technology industry. So we hire and we reskill people from different organizations and industries to come and be technologists, leveraging something called low code, which gives them a sort of shallower learning curve into technology. But by doing that, it means that when we're talking to governments or to councils or to other organizations who are thinking about the poorest people in society, we've got people often with those real world experiences rather than people who've just come from a very different socioeconomic group that typically tend to enter into tech. So yeah, that's our purpose, about changing the face of technology.
Before, which was the new intake that you had, and one of them's a junior doctor, yes. And you think and a lot of the people working, particularly in the NHS, are thinking, I don't have any of these transferable skills. You've got loads, that kind of problem solving and
curiosity, critical thinking, all of those skills are vitally important when you're trying to ascertain how technology can be used and applied in a situation to solve big problems. And we're so reliant on technology. So yeah, she has amazing critical thinking and problem solving skills. And really tech is there for everybody. And that's why I think it's really important we democratize it and enable everyone to kind of come into it, because we've got to solve some big problems in our world, right, around climate change and poverty, and we need everyone together to do that. And technology can really help us, but everybody needs to be a part of the solution.
You're at Scott Logic, along with me, another tech consultancy, but one with a purpose. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. It was one of the reasons I joined Scott Logic. So, looking at sustainable prosperity through innovation and technology is something I was not highly familiar with. But when I was talking to Steve, and he was so passionate about having a purpose-led organization, and for greater good of society. And if I think about, and I'm gonna quote a book like you. So there's a book called The Road to Character, by I think it's David Brooks, and it talks about Adam 1 and Adam 2. Adam 1 is success for you. So it focuses on what we want to get for ourselves. And Adam 2 is about significance through others. And so as we think, as I was thinking, when I was having this conversation with Steve about where am I in my career and what is it that I want to do, I was always interested in social inclusion and social mobility, etc. So, and I wanted to work for an organization that had this bigger purpose. And Scott Logic has 3 missions. And having your social mission sitting at the same prioritization level as your economic and client mission is significant, right? Normally it can get hidden in larger organizations, somewhere on the side, we're doing some D&I and whatnot, but here it's as important as everything else that the organization is focused on. I've got Graham sitting me, he's probably saying to me, hey, you better talk about the right stuff. So purpose is very important, and as you move through your career stages in life, I think there's a point where we stop proving ourselves, that Adam 1, and we move into Adam 2, which is about enabling others and making a difference to society. And I believe that Scott Logic as an organization wants to be great at what we do, grow commercially and people-wise, but we also want to make a difference to society through our agenda. This is why I joined them.
Right. And Charlie, what was it like for you coming back to work, promoting the Northeast, your home?
Yeah, I think that was probably my purpose right from the start. And there's always this complete misconception that if you head into broadcasting, first of all, if you dare to go into radio, of course you want to go and do TV, which I kind of did on the side, but I had this real love of the anonymity of radio. So I never wanted to be the story. I wanted to tell other people's stories, and that never changed. So now that is exactly what I do. I just get an opportunity to kind of explore that element. And as part of that, it's this promotion of the Northeast, because our narrative has to change. We've managed to attract fantastic multinationals up here. We've managed to, you've got the inward investment coming, you've got all of those little pools, but still there's this vision that the Northeast is I know we talked about the commuting distance was sometimes a little bit difficult on the trains and so on, but it shouldn't make the difference that it is when it comes to the financial support or even if we don't talk about support, the financial interest in the Northeast and the purpose of growth. We have a massive added value here. So yes, the real estate's fabulous. I mean, look at this place. This is phenomenal. And it is cheaper. And yes, the labour comparatively with London wages and so on, this is cheaper. But that isn't why you should come here. You should come here because of the absolutely unique talent that is in the Northeast, that is something different. And added to that, you've got this support of the Northeast people that I've worked abroad, I've worked in different parts and on, network radio and TV. There's something different about the Northeast. And if you get everybody's support within that, it's the little gold dust. You can't pay for that. Then you've got your great, cost of living, less of a crisis at times here because you've got, more disposable income potentially, and that allows you to then support the local communities. So then that Adam 2, you tick Adam 1 and Adam 2 by moving up here. So that's part of my thing. Yeah, I want all the Adams.
Well done.
Yeah. And Adaminas. Yeah, they should all be here. Yeah.
Yep. I'd like to stay with this topic of the Northeast, because there's this popular misconception that highly successful people kind of had a head start in life. You've either had very successful parents or you've gone to very good schools. To what impact do you feel like your early years have had an impact on you and your career?
I think that's quite a tricky one, to be honest, because I think in many ways you have a safety net if you have financial stability at home, you definitely have a safety net. So I've worked with an awful lot of charities where people don't have that, and that struggle's hard. Yeah. So for me, I was lucky because both my parents were entrepreneurs. They ran their own businesses, but they worked 7 days a week to do that. So nothing came easy. But then for me, I then saw what it was like to work hard. I saw a different possibility in life, you know, and they were open to me doing that. So I think it does give you a hand in some ways, but I've also seen people who have had things gifted to them and they feel pigeonholed. And they feel like they've got no option. You know, my dad was a doctor, my mum was a doctor, and I had to be a doctor, and that's the end of the line for me. And I actually wanted to be a graphic designer, or I wanted to work third sector, but they don't understand me. So I think you can be hindered in different ways. It's about finding out, being in a supportive environment where you can find out what actually works for you as a person. And I think the sooner you work that out, the better. I found that out probably quite late, I would say. I've always been very sociable. But yeah, I think finding that purpose, if you get that early, then yeah, that's where you get your head start.
Amazing. And from the northeast to South Africa, I mean, you grew up in South Africa, Marra. Kind of, what impact has that had on you at the start of your career?
I think it's been pretty significant, and I think I've got some of my South African network that's dialed in today, so lots of love to them because they're 2 hours, ahead of us. But I think for me, I didn't have this sort of soft entry into a career or support in that sense. But when you talk about successful parents, I think the definition for me means something else, because my parents were very hardworking. They pushed education on my brother and I in a very difficult environment. So for anyone that knows about apartheid, I grew up under the South African apartheid regime, which is really about institutionalized discrimination based on race. And so we had to go to specific schools and education institutions. Everything was sort of laid out in terms of what you could and couldn't do. So we really had to make the best of what was there. So education was very important, and that was pushed by us. But we also I had a lot of strong values and principles about how to be resilient and how to be your best, even in circumstances that were not great. And then growing up in a community that was extremely supportive. So where I grew up, our family was neighbors and friends. And so they say it takes a community to raise a child. And I totally believe that that's what happened. And it's instilled values that's made me very focused in terms of doing the right thing, but also wanting to be the best, work ethic. So I would say that everything that's been instilled, not through having a lot of finance available or just hard work and determination, is what's driven me to actually accelerate in my career.
Great. And Sam, how about you?
Yeah, so I think having role models who demonstrate the impact of working hard. My mum was a single parent. My parents got divorced when I was 8. She was a nurse. She worked 3 jobs to ensure that she could put a roof over our head. She had 3 children. So she really instilled in me the importance of getting an education. I was the first of our generation to go to university. My brother's an entrepreneur. My older brother's an entrepreneur. I've got 3 brothers, lucky me. But that kind of, I guess, the grafting really, and the importance of that, and that you put in and you take out what you put in. And I think that for me is something that I want to instill in my children as well, because I see a lot of entitlement in the world, that things should be in my lap and what have you, but actually you need to make your destiny happen. And you can only do that if you put some hard work and effort into making that work for yourself. So, yeah.
Great. And while we're all thinking back to those early days, if you were to speak to your younger self now at the start of your career, what advice would you give them? Who wants to take that one first? Marra?
I will go. I would say control your temper and...
There's a load of people online now just like,
yeah, think before you speak. That's the younger me. Maybe a little bit of the older me as well, but I used to take things I take things very much to heart, and sometimes I spew out The immediate response that comes to mind. I'm talking like Charlie now. Spew out that response and think about, oh, maybe I should not have used those words. Yeah, you know, I should have been a bit more considerate. So I think my younger self would probably, I'd say, be a bit more reflective, take a deep breath, and as someone said to me, take a walk, gather yourself, and come back and have the conversation. So I think for me, it's all about that, because I've made some really rash decisions based on the fact that if I'd stayed longer or thought about it a little bit more and been a bit more patient about things, it may have turned out in a better, more positive way. And probably, you know, I would have stayed somewhere even longer. You never know how your career would have changed. But I was so, beside being hungry, I just, temperamental would be the word I would describe myself. Stop being temperamental, Marra. Stop it.
You're going to write on lips. On your mirror, yeah.
Yes.
Sam, what about you? Advice to your younger self?
So all of what Marra said as well. But building on that, believe in myself, trust myself. I think often as young girls and as women, you know, we talk about in things like imposter syndrome and all of these sort of categorizations. But, you know, we don't often have self-belief that we can do something. And that's proven by lots of data about the jobs. And when they apply for jobs, you know, they can't do all of it. Women won't apply. But actually just believe and trust in yourself. And give yourself a pat on the back for every success that you get through and every stage of your life, because you've done it through hard work. So, yeah, just believe.
And Charlie?
Definitely the belief element. And people are surprised by that, because you see, if you're quite a talkative person,
You must be really confident.
yeah, but I think within yourself you have all these, you know, doubts. Is that the way to go forward? But the biggest change to my life is probably try and meet your husband earlier. Because we met late, which then, of course, we were lucky enough to have children, but I'm knackered. And like, literally, I'm like at the school gates with, you know, some mums who are like in their 20s. Yeah, I mean, I lived my life and I loved my life, and, you know, I lived my life. But it might, I just think maybe getting a bit more of the sleep struggle earlier on in life might have helped. That's probably the big change I would make, yes. And I might be the opposite to you. Yeah. I might be, instead of staying longer in places, get out earlier. Yeah. I think mine's I'm probably the opposite. I'm probably greater faith, naivety, rather than, you know, having a better assessment of things. That might be me. I should be more temperamental.
You think?
Yeah.
Between us all, as you can see.
Yeah.
Well, we just need to coach each other more. We'll have a secret WhatsApp group after this.
Yeah, we do that. Yeah. I think there's one thing to add as well. One of the things, you know, when you're younger in your career as well, it's that fear to speak up, because you always feel that there's so much of experience in the room, and therefore they must know more than you. And is it a stupid question, or should I ask that? And that happens even, you know, as you get older in your career sometimes, because, but ask it. You know what, all you're gonna do is somebody's going to say, you know, that's probably not right, but you're close, or you'd be surprised and say, actually, that's brilliant. Why didn't we think about that? So there's no stupid questions. And many times when I've kept my mouth shut and not said anything, I thought, oh, that's what I was thinking, but he said it. So say it.
Yeah, I think that using your voice is really important.
Yeah.
You're advocating for yourself, for others, being the ally in the room for yourself and for your own ideas, and owning them, and knowing that that's okay. Absolutely, I think that's really great. Yeah.
Be a great listener.
Yeah.
The things you pick up from other people are tremendous. You know, sometimes the way somebody says something is actually, you know, indicates they are saying the opposite to the words that are actually coming out of their mouth. And how can things be channeled? And you were talking there about, you know, the kind of what sets you up in life. Often, the things you find out about people's backstories and what they've been through that they think is nothing. You know, and you think, if you've had that the race challenges you had, I mean, I can't even imagine that. You know, it's like other people growing up in war zones. You've got that to contend with, and you are still trying to do your job, still trying to go to school. You know, that is your mum with three Three jobs and 4 kids, was it?
3 kids.
3 kids.
Well, yeah, second one was from my last brother is from my dad's second marriage, so she didn't have to raise him, fortunately.
Right. That is tremendous. That's like a powerhouse of a woman to do that. I think that's yeah. Sorry.
It's amazing to listen to. I mean, I know there'll be a lot of people, including me, kind of looking up to the three of you right now. How important do you think it is in this day and age of Instagram and social media to have relatable role models, not just your super glamorous, famous millionaires, but relatable role models to aspire to be like?
I think it's absolutely essential. I think I was giving a talk at a school the other day, and I would honestly say it is the very first time I've given a talk to, say, under 18s, we'll go as broad as that, where I wasn't asked, who is the most famous person you've interviewed? It was literally the first time. And instead, the question I was asked was brilliant, which was, who was the most inspiring person you've interviewed? And I thought, that's the story you should be looking for. Yeah. Didn't know the answer, but great question. Yeah.
I'll write that one off.
Yeah.
Marra, Sam?
So I think it's absolutely important because, especially when I wish that I had seen a lot more role models that were a little bit more like me, not just look like me, but there was the other connector points in terms of, interest or just being from different backgrounds, especially when you're exposed to loads of individuals that are similar and you're the one that stands out. You always think, when you see a role model or somebody that's more like you, think, oh wow, it breaks down those internal limitations that you place in your conscious mind or subconscious mind about what you can and cannot do. So when you see role models out there, they're just inspirational to say, actually, you know what, I can actually do that. If that person can do that, so can I. So it motivates you. There's this level of inspiration you find by just saying, it's not impossible. The art of the possible is there for you, so because there's others that have done it before you.
There's an element, though, in being truthful about your story. Because I, as a mum, see a lot of what I imagine are extremely successful mothers, but behind that, they are on wages that mean they can afford a nanny and they choose to have a nanny, which means they can then work different hours. Or they've got an extremely supportive partner who then became the stay-at-home to allow them to develop their career. Or I feel like there's sometimes...
There has to be authenticity, so I think you need to be a truth teller. So there's this concept that's sold to us that women can have it all and be all, that we're going to look like Kim Kardashian when we're 60, that we can go to the gym for 8 hours a day, that we can have 15 kids and still be a CEO and go on lovely holidays. All of that thing is just all nonsense, right? And I think the biggest challenge is that women, young girls, look up and go, I can't see someone who might look like me or my mum up there. Because often, and I've experienced this in tech, women at that level hide what it's taken for them to get there. Because by being authentic, it meant that they were vulnerable. And that they couldn't admit that they had to go off at 3 o'clock to go and pick up a kid or deal with a snotty nose and all of those things. I've generally had to hide that I've had children in those conversations. So I think it's super important now that we tell the warts and all story. And it's not about saying you can't have it all, it's just about understanding what it takes to do these things. And also, I think where it's really important is that we have to opt in our menfolk. Right? It's not just the women's load. Women are now, particularly I'm in the sandwich generation. I've got youngish children, not as young as yours. I've got an elderly mum with dementia and who's in, kind of end of life. And my mental load, I'm constantly context switching. And what I've learned, and actually probably later on, I wish I'd learned it earlier on, was the importance of a support network, the support system that's around you. It's not just about paying things, but actually making sure you can ask for help as well when you need it, and building that around you. It's okay not to iron everything. I don't iron. We had this conversation earlier. I just refuse.
We don't iron.
We don't iron. But it's okay to let some of that crap go and I don't have a perfect life.
It's okay.
Yeah, we don't iron. You can just tell. have got a steamer though. Steamers are brilliant. But you know, it's okay just to let stuff go. And we are sold such a load of crap. Sorry, we really are as women. And I think we've just got to realise that actually, you know, we've just got to. We want to be financially independent. We want to be successful. Some things have to go. Men have to join us on the journey. But we have to be relatable for the women that are coming up and put the ladder down and pull them up with us. So yeah.
I was going to say yes.
Yes, there we go.
It's on the boil, like one has to come off at some point. And I think, because I'm in the sandwich as well, again, another reason why I should have married earlier. Anyway, but don't do that. But you know, something has to dip off there. And I feel like there are some of my friends who have chosen not to have children, and so they've seen the benefit of that to other parts of their life, and they're very, very happy in that zone. And it's given them a lot more free time to keep another pot on the go, and that's been the fulfilling part of their life, whether that's been career or home or friends, the times where you could go out. And you know, I think that that's the truth of it though, isn't it?
It is.
Some things,
my life is a compromise at times, right? So you just have to decide that pot's going to overboil, or I'm not going to put it on the hob. And that's just the reality. And you're going to make a decision and make a choice. As long as you're making the choice for you in the right way, and you're not being forced into the choice, I think that's okay.
What pot have you taken off?
I'd say probably my social life. You know, in reality, I have love wonderfully. I have a lot of friends that I met online through an IVF journey. So that I've known them for 16 years, and some of them I've not met in person, but they are some of my bestest friends because we've shared so much together. But they're always there for me. So wherever I am in the world, they're always there. But it's the physical relationships at times. But I also know that my friends that I've known forever will always be there for me. So that's okay. But yeah, that is a bit that I get challenged. So yeah, I'm rubbish. One drink and that's it. I'm gone. So yeah.
Well, you want me to say something?
No. I was just thinking we've run out of my questions.
No, I think for me it's all about balance, actually, at the end of the day. It's hard to have balance when there's inequality, I guess, in terms of how you live your life. So it's no longer men do this and women do that, and this is the breadwinner and so on. It's about equal playing fields right now. So who's going to support us to move forward? And with me, most of my career I was a single mom.
Yeah.
So I had my parents as my infrastructure to support me. Otherwise, I don't think I would have made it through a lot of the stuff I was doing. And now I've decided, obviously, on top of everything else, I'll get a dog. So the dog is now become, you know, you need to find somebody to look after your dog as well. So I think it's about just trying to have that support structure is really important, but sometimes you have to give up things.
Yes, you do.
So I don't socialize as I used to socialize as well. I can't because my life is a little bit compartmentalized at the moment. So I know what I have to do, and I have to schedule my diary as well. So I think ultimately it's, you know, turning off pots or stoves, whatever you want to call it. It's just about trying to find a balance and making sure you have people around that you can reach out to. Because we cannot do all of this on our own. It's just not sometimes possible, but there's also mental health and stress and all of those things that come along when you're trying to be superwoman that you have to deal with as well.
We're going to be wild women when we're 70 though. I'm telling you now. We'll be like teenagers all over again.
There was a lady I was talking to the other day, and she was taking the U-curve, the whole thing about the happiness element. And she said, right, how old are you? And I said, well, I'm mid-40s. And she was like, oh, you're in the pit of despair. I was like, oh, right, how long am I in the pit of despair? And she goes, right, okay, so have you got young children? I was like, yeah, toddlers are youngest. She's like, right, okay, push on another 10 years. She's like, are you dealing with like elderly ill parents? I was like, yeah. She said, push 80. I've got to wait to 80 until I'm actually feeling quite happy at the moment. But it is making, I've cut corners on a lot of stuff. I've got amazing friends who I've known since like childhood. I saw one of them on Monday, and it was, you know, when you have those meetings. Meetings! Yeah. I should love that. I called it a meeting. Drinking wine. And your roots. It's like your roots have just been fed. They just know everything about you. You know, the jokes are still, and there's nothing better than that. And then at the same time, the next day, I was knocking about with a new friend that I've met through the Helix site, who is tremendous, blow your mind, wonderful woman. And I'm really glad that she's now part of my life. You know, you can have those little balances, but it's where do you find the room to go to the foam party at the local working men's club? I found time for that Saturday morning. Six-year-olds with glow sticks. It was absolutely terrifying. You want to come? Yeah.
Signing you guys up. That's my only.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for answering all of my questions. I'd like to switch us now to answering some of the audience's questions. So we've got some already been submitted through Slido. For those of you in the room, if you'd like to submit any, just check out the QR code that's printed around on the walls. So I'll start off with one I think has been written here for you, Sam. What tip would you, no, in a good way, what tip would you give to a woman who is a squiggly careerist? 4 years in their new role as a senior, aspiring to break into leadership. How do I get there?
Finding the sponsors, and if you want to do it in your existing company, I think it's about understanding what you need to get into leadership, like understanding where the areas you need to grow into, your development opportunities, but finding the sponsors within your existing organisation. Mentors are awesome. You know that you can't get into leadership unless you're bouncing into another company and you're going for a leadership role. But you know you need that sponsorship. Those kind of allies who will work with you to help you to manage your kind of experiences and what have you. So that for me would be find the opportunity, find an area that you want to go and be in, for example. Find a person you want to work for. Finding out who you want to work for as an aspiring leader is really, really important. And then building up your mentorship network so that you've got people to mentor you into that role and then ultimately sponsor you in there as well. But, you know, putting your hand up, I always say this, put your hand up for everything. I mean, I have an issue with saying no to stuff, I know that, but just put your hand up because you do not know what someone will go, can you just do this? And you have no idea what impact that will have on your career. So, yeah. There you go.
Charlie, Marra, anything you want to add? Tips for a squiggly career?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Sam said. I think mentoring is quite important, finding somebody that you respect and that you think will be able to provide you with the advice you need. I think there's a term I heard that's called the personal boardroom, which I utilize. And personal boardroom is just about having a list of individuals that you will call upon, whether it's a technical skill that you want to learn more about, or it's something behavioral that you can get support on, that you think that person's really great and I'd like to learn a bit more from them, or it's just something that's more personal and somebody that you trust, that you've got a network of individuals that you can reach out to. So for me, having that personal boardroom that I can touch base on particular things helps eradicate the level of stress that you can feel when you're trying to deal with things on your own. Yeah. And from a career movement perspective, having the ability to, I guess, go through the different forks of people that you can touch. But mentoring, coaching, even external mentors, I found external mentors really, really useful. Yeah. Just reaching out to somebody you've heard about and thinking, oh, I wonder if that person would be interested in mentoring me, or having a conversation and a coffee with me.
I think one of the things, just to add to that as well, is I invested in a coach. So having someone completely external to my network who really helped me to understand me. And I think that as well, that investment in you, if you want to go for leadership, or just that personal investment in your personal development, just invest in people who can support you in those relationships.
Well, I was just going to say, I've been given a mentor this week.
There you go.
And I was just thinking, how does that fit? So I've mentored people before, but within broadcasting. And the lady that I've been matched with, it was through the Northern Power Women Awards. So they'd like it to be not just about one night, that you have this kind of procedure afterwards. And the lady I've been matched with works in finance. And initially on paper, you'd think, what are we, where are we going to match together? But I think it is those kind of other elements to your personality, or what you might be. Maybe I'll just get her to write some funding bids for me. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah. Seems like a nice lady.
Giving them a task though.
No. Okay. Got my book references as well. No, I think that what they were saying was come out with they need, from the mentees, they want something that's very direct. What is your aim from each of these sessions? Yes, so be very clear about that when you're going to...
You don't just go into it for a chat. Be really specific about what you want to get out of it, and then you'll have the best relationship. Being a mentee and a mentor being a mentor is super rewarding. Yeah. So people do it because they want to kind of give back and support as well. So yeah, but you have to invest in it.
Thank you. Got another audience one here, so should be interesting. What adversity have you faced within your career, and how did you overcome it? Yeah. Let's go for one example each.
Go on, sorry, Charlie, go.
Probably don't want to explore it too much, if I'm honest, but sexism, and definitely post-motherhood problems. Assumptions that are made about people when they become mothers. I actually think that you potentially become a better juggler of things because you have to prioritise, you become more efficient and all the rest of it. And I don't think I valued that in other people. I don't want to get sued. Yeah. Sexism, I think, is rife, unfortunately.
I think sexism for me, and I was telling this story to somebody. I think that every decade of my life, I've experienced some form of sexism and discrimination based on the fact that I was born female. There's been sexual harassment. I've had sexual assault. So you experience those things. So you overcome that. The biggest challenge, I think, is that we normalise it as well. So we accept that that's going to happen to us as women sometimes in the workplace. 16 years old, I walk into an office, my first office job in the summer, day 2, and I'm wearing a shorter skirt because it's warm. And the guy says to me, "Oh, I can see your legs today. That's great." And you just sit there and go, "Okay, all right." And then you sit down and you just kind of trying to figure stuff out. We normalise and accept that behaviour, so a lot of that stuff, and it's really, it's why I'm doing what I'm doing now, because I will not let the next generation suffer with the things that I've suffered with. Absolutely.
I think for me, it's more around micro-inequity that's sort of been really impactful since I've been in the UK. And micro-inequity is really, they call it a death by 1,000 cuts. And it's a term that was defined by Mary Rowe from MIT, which is, it's very hard to prove because it's how you feel. It's how you feel in a situation. And really, an example that stands out in the director role, having standing in a meeting with a whole lot of colleagues, men and women, and because I was the only sort of diverse person there, but the conversation was happening, quite a good conversation, but the person that was speaking didn't really give me eye contact, didn't acknowledge that I was there. And what that does is it sort of makes you feel really small and invisible, but it's a micro-inequity because it's normally targeted at people either of color or women. In a conversation, it's very hard to prove, it's subtle, and in most instances, it's not intentional. So, but what it did to me, because I experienced it more than once in the same organization, was I could bring it to the surface, but normally the question would be, what evidence do you have? And I didn't really mean it, I didn't really mean it. So what it did for me was I exited because I just didn't enjoy the culture. It was not inclusive. It made you feel like really, really small. And when you start losing confidence in yourself, when you're fairly confident, then you know that it's time to actually shift gears and pivot in terms of your career. So I think for me, micro inequities has been the big ones.
And what a loss for that business. And this is the thing, it's kind of, when you see businesses that do invest in, say, ESG and so on, you say they bring in the best talent and they can keep it. Or you carry on not dealing with this type of thing and then you lose talent. Yeah. And not only that, you lose it by word of mouth because suddenly everything gets black marked for that reason. Don't go there because that's, you need an overhaul, you need a revolution to sort that institution out.
I talk about this a lot, a lot of organisations do diversity by numbers, so they'll bring women in and other diverse groups in, but they don't figure out how to ensure that people can thrive in that organisation by shifting the culture, which takes a lot, and the mindsets that exist within it. So you get these micro inequities, you get the discrimination that is just so silent and under the hood of the culture, and it just really, it's so insidious. It's really what destroys culture an awful lot.
It's a good one. I'd be interested to get answers from Marra and Sam. What advice would you give to a mature woman looking to get into the tech sector?
Do it.
The doctor.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, she's not mature. I mean, but honestly, you know what? We underestimate the transferable skills that people have from other industries. And I think we live so long these days. You know, we've got almost 3 lives in us, and the technology industry needs people. So just go on, find a course, look at the charities that exist like Tech She Can or STEMettes. Think about how you can get support there's loads of support from the colleges around here in the Northeast as well. Just take a step. Find your area of passion. I think that's really important in technology. Like, find what you want to be a part of. You know, if I was starting out now, probably data for me. I adore data. I find it really interesting. So find those areas, but just take a step and invest in yourself. And yeah, just do it. Just go for it, because you will never not be able to use the experience of your life to have an impact in creating tech for the future.
How do you know which area to get into? Because sometimes, you know, I remember reading about there being 13,000 job titles just within tech. So how do you know what they actually stand for?
I think it's exploration. So if you know people within kind of technology, so I'm going to point to Hannah in the audience here, but I know Hannah has been coaching one of our trainees who was a musician, and he became kind of interested in testing, for example, which is what Hannah does. So, you know, talking to people and exploring, because typically we know people who work in tech now, it's not just something over there, but understanding that, doing some research into it and finding out what areas you might be, you know, you might have a passion for cybersecurity and security and hacking and understanding that type of thing. So you need to do some research and try some stuff out. But, you know, for me, as I've grown up in technology, it's always been about, for me, data. Data can give us so much, and it's so exciting when you start to unpick it and unpack it. But yeah, just go and explore. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say speak to people that are in the field because of how big it is. I mean, I've just been in tech for just over 12 months, and I think if I had to actually choose a space, it'd probably be user experience because it's more creative and more interesting to me. But I think there's opportunity for individuals, regardless of age, to change careers now. The government's, even the apprenticeship schemes has, you know, qualifications for anyone that can go onto an apprenticeship as long as you're changing, you know, your course of study. It's not something that you experienced in. So use it as an opportunity. If you're passionate about something, life is too short not to try it. So I would say do some investigation, like Sam said. Find an area that's more conducive to the strengths and the passions that you have. So like, if I'm creative, I'll go into that. I won't do data. Or development, because I can't see myself writing code. But, you know, and Graham might, please tell me, do you write code in user experience? Thank God. I chose the right career, right? So, yeah, so I think just go for it. I do multiple things in my personal life as well. You know, writing songs, writing music, singing, you name it, studying different things. I've done so many qualifications in various things because I was interested, and I think anybody should be able to do that.
I think what's also important is to know that the world of tech is huge. So it's not just about being a developer or a data analyst or a cybersecurity specialist. You know, you can be a business analyst, you can be a project manager. And those kind of what I call the supporting functions are equally as important. And it might be that's an easier transition to make initially, and then you can kind of go and explore roles to become maybe a solution architect or something like that. So there's a huge universe of roles out there. The most important thing is bringing your authentic self and your experience into that role, because that's where you can have a real impact.
Advice, thank you. And Charlie, we've got a question here for you. Do you think you have to be based in London or Manchester to make it as a journalist?
Oh, because I used to be. No.
There are sufficient opportunities in the Northeast now?
I think that is changing. I think that is, and changing extremely recently. There's been a massive, it's tricky because the journalism sector is obviously, it's morphed into something that it never was before. You know, so 20 years ago, you had a very strong press sector, you had TV, you had your traditional sources. Online didn't really rise at that point, whereas now everything is digital first. So to be a journalist now, it is generally multimedia and you need to write in different ways. So the way we communicate and talk to each other is in a different way. You know, you might be kinesthetic, so I'm going to start using loads of words about how we feel. You might be visual, so I'm going to say the word see a lot. You know, there's all that type of thing. And then you move that into online, broadcast, TV, radio, and beyond. That can be done from anywhere. The pooling of resources was always London. And I think the powerhouses have moved out. So there is a big pool in Leeds, big pool in Manchester, and I worked over there a lot. But in the Northeast now, you've got the whole screen industry has developed. There's a lot of crossover. You have some wonderful titles. You've got Northeast Times. You've got a few more which are on the up and coming now as well. There's no reason to do that. I know some fantastic journalists who write for local publications from abroad, and I know people who write from here and, you know, speak from here, but broadcast internationally. So, you know, tech has helped that. Yeah, I don't think you need to. I think the tricky thing comes with support structures above. And I think those, unfortunately, still are focused in Manchester and London. But there's a push to try and do it elsewhere. You know, Channel 4's tried to help that with their investment. The BBC has. We've got the new digital stuff coming. So fingers crossed. Yeah.
Great, thank you. A question for all of you here. You've all suggested imposter syndrome improves with experience, but are there any active steps you can take to combat it?
There's a book, isn't it, by Amy Cuddy that's called
Library's full.
Library is full.
Presence. It's called Presence, and basically she talks about, she uses a statement that, or phrase, fake it till you make it. Right? And the reason for that is because sometimes, and there's a lot of tools and techniques that one can actually practice, physical and mental, to actually prepare yourself before you go into a room. So most of the time, imposter syndrome is not really real. It's not true. I mean, for who we feel that way because we think there's people that always know more than us, or we're going to be asked a question that we're not going to be able to answer, etc., etc. But it's really about, if you don't have to know everything, that's the resolution, is you don't have to know everything. And there's techniques that one can actually prepare yourself to go into conversations that makes you not feel as, I guess, imposterous, as you, if that is that a word, as you should, it will be now. I've created a new word, but it's really, she uses this phrase, "fake it till you make it," because in most instances, it's about what you put out, how you come across, versus what you're feeling on the inside. So we can be feeling really awful, sick, and lacking confidence, but how we come across and how we say things and how we prepare for the moment makes a big difference.
You can help yourself in that moment. I think the number of people at big events, if you look backstage doing the power stance, or the number of people who say they're nipping off to the toilet and they're not just going to the loo, they're standing with the door closed. And they're like, yeah, I have to do this. And they do that for a couple of minutes and then they come like, I'm fine now, I'm sorted. Yeah, I think you learn to channel it, don't you? You know what your nerves, and there's nothing wrong with nerves as well. No, I mean, that can be great, yeah.
Understanding how your brain works. You know, our brains are wired for threat. That's how we've evolved over, centuries and millennia. Understanding that it can play tricks on you and be a bit tricksy at those times is okay, but you need to learn to, as you said, learn to channel it. We are, I think, driven by our inner critic that's telling us we can't or we should, and you've got to flip that into your inner cheerleader. Yeah. I have a wonderful coach who talks about naming your critic. So mine's got a specific name. I'm not going to share it, but understanding that and personalising it in a way, and then as you said, trying to find your ways out of it. Reframing, I find, often helps. Also, in certain situations where you feel you should be, I hate using that word should and ought because they should just be banned. The expert in the room, become the coach in the room. Ask open-ended questions. because often solutions are found in other people, and not always in yourself. And I learned that from a leader I worked with who was Canadian and came to lead a team that supported our healthcare business at Microsoft. She knew nothing about the NHS, and you're expected to know everything. But she was just more coach-like, just asking questions, and it really, really worked. And so, being humble, you can learn a lot more, but and I think energy, what you give back out, is really important too.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. The number of politicians I've met who've gone straight into, imagine you've taken on a role in the briefing notes. So suddenly you are the health secretary, and you've got to suddenly know all about this stuff. You're not going to, and you've got to be up and running really quickly, but being humble and asking the right people who are right at the coalface what their experience is and what their most recent knowledge is, that's the way to work with it.
And this should be an interesting one. We've touched about toxic leadership, how sometimes that can make you want to leave. We also touched on purposeful companies. So if you had a choice between a multinational with a bad impact on society, such as petroleum, Coca-Cola, or a purposeful company, such as an NGO, but it had toxic leadership, which would you choose?
That's really, really... Who asked that question? Message me on LinkedIn. Gosh, that is... How do you know they've got a toxic leader? Probably by reputation. Okay. I would probably go for the NGO in the hope that I could change the toxic leadership. So either I'm going into a position that I can influence, and or I'm coming in as a leader. So that probably would be... I'm quite purpose-driven. I would struggle to probably work for some organisations that have a really negative impact on society. But yeah, for me, it would probably, where can I drive change? Use my experience and my voice to do that.
Yeah, I think it's not an easy question to answer, but I think sometimes you just have to go back into your inner self and your value system and your beliefs and what it is that will drive you and not make you feel guilty. And for me, that would be actually toxic leadership. I can probably, think of ways and resolutions to deal with that, but I can't change a multinational in terms of what they do externally and to society as a whole. So I would definitely have to go the NGO route, or none at all. Start my own business.
That's a great get out. Become a consultant into the NGO.
I think it hits on something quite tricky that's coming up an awful lot in recruitment across the board at the moment, which is that companies are being questioned by generally younger generations who get through a few series of the interviews, get to the final interview, and then they push back on, where did you source your furniture? Why did you work with that contract with the betting company? Why did you work with the defence organisation? And if they don't get the answers they want, they will not take the job. And I think there is something there, there's some kind of like forced change by, people power, basically, isn't it? But when you drill down into that, there is always another side. So defence is controversial in many ways as a sector, but then people always want it used in the right ways. So is it always wrong? Betting organisations are wrong, or are they? If they're managed correctly, then you've got a kind of a full investment in the economy. So I think there's always a debate that can be had. So it comes down to your own personal value system. Where are you going to be less embarrassed to be? Where are you going to feel less awkward? And what do you think you can force through in the long run? Yeah.
And that can flip both ways, right? So
totally.
Potentially have an impact working for a big petroleum company where they might go and dig for petrol or go into sustainable energy. It's whether you feel you can have enough impact in a bigger organisation versus potentially a smaller one, I think. But it's all about your personal choice, really.
And your level of influence.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And we could keep going all night, but I'm conscious you've been talking for a long time, so we'll do one final question. I think this is a good one to end on. We're here in the Northeast, sat in the office of a tech company. So the person who would like to ask, what are the main challenges that you think the Northeast tech sector still faces when it comes to D&I?
When it comes to D&I, generally, I think across the tech sector, there's a challenge around diversity all up. I think there's a real humility in the Northeast. I'm not from the Northeast, as you can probably guess. I see a lot of pride and ambition in this part of the world. And I think there's an opportunity that they're willing to go on that kind of learning journey to be better and different and to represent the Northeast in all its beautiful glory. That's not to say there are probably pockets where there are challenges, because there are everywhere. I think there's a real opportunity for the Northeast to lead the way on D&I and to show other tech organisations and other parts of the country how it should be done. That would be my diplomatic answer, I think, probably. It's a great place to be, by the way. I love it out there.
I think there's an innate challenge, which is that our demographics across the Northeast, we have very low percentages of non-white population. And that's from the roots upwards. So if you've got companies which are based here, you're going to have to be bringing people in. So that will be people who are either from other parts of the UK or from abroad. So then you head down into kind of Brexit routes and all the challenges of that and employment. That is there. The key is, are we open to it? And are we open to learning from other people with different experiences? Yes. So is it a door that's ready to be pushed? Yes. Only the other day, there's a guy I met who's at the Newcastle Business School, and he is phenomenal, right? This guy called Kenny, and he was living in California, and he was offered a full scholarship at MIT to do his MBA, and he turned it down. He turned it down for Newcastle, where he was going to have to pay for his lodgings, all the rest of that. And the reason he did was because of real world experience. So immediately I've connected him up with tech firms in the Northeast, because he has the experience of the Nigerian tech sector, he has experience of the Indian tech sector, California's been in Silicon Valley, and now he's in the Northeast. So let's make use of having that 2-year work visa, hopefully expand it, and then you've got him. And then on top of that, he's got all of his mates who were there alongside him. And as soon as they start to see what can the Northeast offer, that's how you start it. One tiny seed can grow into this wider offering. But is the Northeast welcoming to that? Yes. It's just we're starting off behind the start line, really, I think.
No. I think Sam and Charlie probably know the Northeast a lot better than I do. I think just from a tech sector perspective and Scott Logic, it's, the demographics is the big thing. Looking at women, people from from ethnic minority groups that we want to attract into the space, but also the intentionality behind it. So I think a lot of, even in the recruitment side of things, we say we want to bring diversity in, but then the intentionality during the process, how intentional are we around social mobility? How open are we to things like that? Or are we just, attracted to certain individuals that come from certain backgrounds in certain universities and so forth? So I think it's about changing mindsets that will also help towards, moving the dial in that space, because there's some great universities at this side, but there's also, individuals that don't have the opportunity to go to those universities, but have maximum potential that we could exploit, not exploit, but, help them to actually see the benefits of coming into the sector. So I think there's opportunities that we need to widen our perspective and our lens around diversity and inclusion to make it happen.
I can just finish on, I think it's really important, that kind of widening of the lens. I talked earlier about ensuring people can thrive when they arrive in the tech sector. We, at Marra, we believe in fixing the systems that hold people back rather than fixing people. We have to be intentional about the systems that exist to hold people in their place, whether that's socioeconomic, whether it's the 9 to 5 that impacts women and school drop-offs and those things. There's a real opportunity for organisations to think differently up here and lead the way in terms of how business is run and the tech sector, and that's what we should be grappling. So we make sure that place is really, really inclusive, and that's why we're here.
Fantastic. Well, I've absolutely loved talking to all of you tonight. Thank you to the audience for all of your questions. Please join me in giving the panel a round of applause. All right, that's it. Thank you very much. Please continue to help yourself to food and drink.